as the advisor, have to ensure that you are doing the research necessary to come to the answer that the policymaker would need to help them in making their decision. So an example of this could be, let's say the government of Jamaica wants input on a national youth policy. They would ask the National Secondary Students Council to do research on a particular section of the policy to answer a question. Let's say, can we do with repealing the Education Act and the regulations and replacing it with something else? Then now the NSSC would have to do that research to see, okay, can we really live without certain provisions in the law for X amount of time while the government and Parliament prepares themselves to draft legislation, and knowing that's a long process, and they have to come to that decision to help the ministry to come to that decision. That's what we would call boardroom advocacy, because you're really in that process with them in the belly of the beast to get those things done. Now, after that, you have media campaigning. Now that gives a public dimension to any cause that you're doing. And in many cases, it can be effective if you do it right. Now, normally organizations do this to place public pressure on people and to have that conversation start up about the issues of the day. So I can remember up here in Florida a few weeks ago, a representative from a certain part of the state submitted a bill to the legislature similar to the Texas abortion ban that was passed into law in September. Now, the media firestorm that happened across the country has all but killed that piece of legislation, because it is so egregious for anyone to even think of doing something similar to what Texas had done. They placed enough pressure on that particular representative and the leadership of the legislature and the party to which he belongs to kind of have him pull back on the bill and not to be as forthright or as forceful in his pushing of it. Now, in a local context, you can think of any organization that does a campaign. Could be Equality Jamaica, Jamaicans for Justice. On the other side of that spectrum, you have the Jamaica Coalition for Health Society. And all of these groups, they take part heavily in media campaigning to get their message across and to start those national conversations. And this is my favorite one, lobbying. So lobbying is kind of I wouldn't necessarily say the apex of civic engagement, but it's really up there, because you are meeting face to face with the politicians, the elected officials, or in the appointed ones, depending on where you are and who you're talking to. And normally organizations with large usership bases or large demographics, like a teachers union or the Florida College System Student Government Association with 1 million college students, we are the ones who come up here to the state capitol or to the parliament or wherever, and we talk to them. We have to develop those relationships, and we have to ensure that we are in their ears about certain things and giving them information too when they need it, because when they are properly informed, they can make better informed decisions. And when politicians make good decisions, it's the people that benefit. And if you choose to go that route of the civic engagement, you will find yourself becoming jaded to a lot of things. And that's why I wouldn't say it's the apex, but you do have that ready access to decision makers, and you're better able to influence the way policy and legislation shift or even written, depending on where you are. So let me continue. Next would be civic learning. Now we're on to the non-political side of this. So when we're talking about civic learning, it's primarily just civic education. And you can either get that through school or through a course, or you could do it yourself. But the best and most effective way to engage in civic learning is to figure out for yourself first the system and how others and yourself can interact with that system effectively in your community. And then you show that system to everyone else. You're basically explaining the system to people and helping them to understand it so that they can become active citizens and to participate in the democratic process. Now, you have to prepare yourself in this civic learning exercise for possible political engagement. Or you could be a trainer. Like, there are people who go into organizations knowing full well how these systems work, and they train other people because they may not necessarily want to do politics or to be involved with politicians, and that's quite fair. So once you get past the what and the how, you have to choose a why and a what again. So when you're choosing a cause, you have to think of what drives you, what do you love to do? What are you passionate about? If you're a med student and you genuinely love medicine, your cause could be fighting for access to healthcare for people, fighting in a Jamaican sense to increase budgetary allocations to people with mental health, to increase per spending in hospitals, to increase the general funding of the National Health Fund, those kinds of things. And let's say you have interest in another area. Let's say you love the law. You could be as effective as some people up here on Capitol Hill in Tallahassee or in DC. You could be safeguarding democratic processes. You could be working towards constitutional and legislative changes. You could be on the front line of policy and influence. If that is what you love, then go into it and go into it 100% with all of your heart. Now, when it comes to politics in the Jamaican context, let's admit it, it's very toxic and can be very deadly for some people, and it can be a very good thing for others. Now, I would suggest when choosing what organization you want to work with, I would suggest asking yourself if you want to be known publicly as supporting one P over another P. And if you are brave enough, because you have to be brave in Jamaica to do something like this, if you're brave enough to want to support that party publicly, then by all means, join that party's youth group, join the party, do work with the party, and make sure that your public profile goes up to a point where people are seeking you out to do things. And personal experience, I will say I went this route. When it came to politics, I aligned myself with the Jamaica Labour Party, even though when I was aligned to them, I was unique. And Christina could tell you this if you asked her. I may have aligned myself one way, but as long as I step through that office door and I am in there with that policymaker or with that politician or with that minister or with anybody, I am all about the policy and I am an independent when I'm in the room. So you have to figure out what works for you. And if you decide you don't want to go down the political route and you still want to make a change in your community or in your country, you can go to NGOs. There are tons of them all over the place. You have J Flag, Equality Jamaica, you have your national teachers unions, you have the UE Guild of Students, you have all kinds of organizations that you can join. And if you don't want to join with your life in civic engagement, you can always start your own. And it's not going to be easy to do that, but at the same time, you can do it if you want to. Now, when it comes to going into this field, you have to treat it like a calling. And that's how I treat it. And I'm using this personal experience again to tell you, you cannot jump into this whole world if if your family and friends tell you to do this. Like, excuse me, if let's say you're at a protest and you take the mic and you say something extemporaneously and you are amazing at doing it, and your best friend is like, hey, you should da 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 da. No, do not do it. Don't do it. Don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. If you are in Jamaica, make sure that thing is in New Zealand. Do not touch it. But if strangers, if people who you've never seen before in your life tell you you need to go into this, that means you have either touched that person's life or you have changed that person's life in such a way that they think you should do that for other people. That is part of your calling, right? And if you want to go into this and you're doing it for social media, or to pad your resume, don't do it. I will be the first person to tell you do not do it, because if you do, we will know and we can see right through the facade, and we will talk about you behind your back in a very negative way. And it's not very pretty all the time. Some people do it, some people don't. I don't talk about people behind their backs like that, but it does happen, because I've heard my fair share of conversations about bad people who come in with the impression of doing good, but they're really bad people. And if you really see that need in your community for change, just do it. And it may be cliche, and yes, I will say it, be the change that you want to see, right? So when you are in the community and you say, okay, we need a community center, or we need some roads to be fixed, write to your member of parliament. If you see them walking through the neighborhood, stop them, pull them over and say, hey, MP, XYZ road need to fix, and you keep on applying pressure to that person so that you can get that, or at least some kind of incremental change done in your community. Now, if you're jumping into this for the first time, and if you're new to all of this, there are things that you would need to understand from the jump. And these are things that I honestly did not know until, say, 5-6 years going into this thing. You have to understand the needs of the people that you're advocating for if you're going to become an advocate. You need to have strong, intelligent minds around you that aren't afraid to think outside of the box and to think out loud. You have to do your research. And once again, I'm harping on Christina because she's the only person I really know in this space right now. She knows that I tell people all the time, and she would even tell you, 15 times that I say it all the time. Know what you're going to talk about before you enter the room. That's where the research comes in. You cannot, absolutely cannot go someplace saying you want to be a change maker without knowing the issues that you're fighting for, because people will laugh at you. They will laugh you out of the room, and you will just be another person, another blip in history. If you want to be effective, you absolutely, positively must make sure that you know what you're saying and that you know what you're doing. It will take some time to learn, I must admit that, but you absolutely have to do your research. You have to be confident as well. Look good, dress impeccably every time you are out in public, because when you look good, you feel good. When you feel good, you feel like you own the world and you can do anything. And when you have that feeling, you are about 10, 15, 20 times, I'm exaggerating, 20 times more likely to get things done and to get yourself access to certain places. Like and once again, I'm going to call on Christina again. We were just talking earlier about the suit that I wore, because I am in Tallahassee this week for a week of advocacy and lobbying. And the suit that I wore today, I put that suit on, and it was probably the best suit I've ever bought in my life. And it got me the access that I needed, that I already have. It enhanced my access to these people, and it made me feel good. And I got a lot of stuff done today. So it leads up. You have to look good, and please have a sense of humor. Do not take yourselves too seriously. Learn to laugh at yourself, because this will get stressful, and there will be days when you have no other alternative but to just get up, look at yourself in the mirror, and just laugh. Just laugh. Laugh it off. Sometimes when things happen, you're like, oh, why did this have to happen this way? Just laugh. Just laugh. And see, at the end, know what you're going to talk about before you enter the room. That already. No, and I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to know what you're going to talk about before you enter the room, because you do not want to sound like a person who does not know what they're talking about, because then you'll be branded for life as an idiot, and you do not want that. And I am sorry if I am offending any sensibilities this evening, but I would add another one to that, is be straightforward in how you say things. Don't beat around the bush. Don't carry someone over here with a line of argument and then come back. No, say what you mean and mean what you say the first time. That way people will understand what you're saying and they'll respect you more for it. Now, this slide I wrote and I said to myself, what have I actually learned throughout my life in civic engagement that I can actually share with you, something you can take away from this? And I came up with the politics of engagement, 7 very ugly truths, right? And number 1, and there is a reason this is number 1, politics will sometimes supersede the greater good. And that is something that
We're not
newer
seeing that slide,
advocates and
Chris.
you're not seeing the slide?
Yeah, that one is
Why
the
not?
7 ugly truths. I think you have to next it.
Can you see it now?
I'm seeing if you're new. Are you seeing it on your screen?
I am looking at the politics of engagement, but I can still go on if you can't see it. I'll tell you what they are anyway. So,
Oh, no.
as I said, number 1, politics will sometimes supersede the greater good. And the quicker you learn that is the easier your life will be, because not everything will come to you easily. You have to work hard for it. And in that work, you will realize that the politics of politics will always, or most times, win. And sometimes when that does win, it could be good and it could be bad, but it just depends on exactly what's happening. Number 2 of the 7 ugly truths, late nights and early mornings are going to be the story of your life. I woke up at 8 o'clock this morning to go to the Capitol building for 9. And then I only just left at 6 to have dinner and then come back to my hotel to do this with you today. And then when I'm done here, I'm going to go back and to do some more work with people because it's going to be a lot of work. And the third ugly truth, not everyone is your friend. Granted, there will be people that you meet along this journey that you will become friends with. And sometimes you will initially hate that person. And I don't know if Christina remembers this, but we met the first time when we were both in 6th form and we could not stand each other. And now we're the closest of friends. You just have to find those good people, the people who your spirit tech like that, and just develop those friendships with them. And when you work with people a lot and you spend a lot of time with them, you will eventually get to know them and you'll get to love them and like them as friends. Now, ugly truth number 4, some people are not there to do the work. They're there for the photo ops and to pad their resumes. Now, I can tell you right now, off the top of my head, 15 or 20 people right now in the Jamaican civic engagement space through all facets of it, who are just there for the Instagram posts and the Twitter and everything like that. Don't be like them, because they are just there to take up positions and titles and not do any of the work to actually change people's lives. And those people are the most disingenuous of all. And number 5, ugly truth number 5, there's no money in this. If you thought you're going to do this and get money, unless you are actually getting a job working in the system, you are not going to be earning. But if it is that you do take up a position in a certain in an organization that decides to give you, say, a few dollars as a stipend for or a per diem for when you go out on conferences and stuff like that, then you get a little bit of money. But there isn't much money in this field. You have to do it for the love. And number 6, sometimes you're going to have to cut a few throats to get ahead. And this is not going to be all the time, but there will be instances where you cannot be kind to everyone, because at the end of the day, it is a competitive space. People are trying to do as much as they can, and sometimes it will get political. And the politics of engagement, as I said earlier, can get very nasty. So I would strongly suggest that you limit your throat cutting to no more than 5 for your entire life, because when you cut a throat, it's going to be very hard to sew it back up. Very, very hard to sew it back up. And last ugly truth, this work is mostly thankless. And some people will think that you're extra, or you're just enough, or you just want in everything, and whatever, whatever. A lot of times people will ask you what you do, and when you give them the most fulsome explanation of it, they will still be looking at you confused and dazed and wondering what the hell you just said. And that is the ugly truth of the politics of civic engagement. And ladies and gentlemen, I am done with this presentation. If anyone has any questions, by all means, if Christina would indulge me in taking questions, I love taking questions. I would definitely love to do that. But yeah, thank you for listening. And I hope that this helps you along your journey in civic engagement if you choose to do that. So yeah, I'm done. Excuse me one second.
Okay, all right. So quite a lot for us for there to think about, particularly those last 7 ugly truths. So the floor is now open for any questions. We'll have about 5 minutes Q&A. So if you have any questions at all for Christopher, please indicate at this time. And as you said, he loved questions, so he'd be happy to take from you.
Ask me all the dirty details of things, I'll tell you everything. Go ahead. No questions? Wow. Someone can raise their hand or send a question in the chat if you don't want to speak, or no questions at all.
Maybe it was very clear, Christopher. That could also be it.
What wasn't clear?
That could always be it. So I'm going to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
So seeing that you would have been able to work in both the Jamaican political landscape as a youth, right, as well as the US political landscape, still as a young person.
Yes.
So where would you see their similarities and differences? And really, is there a true place for youth engagement? So for a young person here right now who probably think about one day they want to get involved in politics, or even right now, you know, they want to get involved in the civic aspect. Do you think there's really a space for young people? And do you see differences between what you have here in Jamaica and in the States?
So that's actually a very good question. When you're in Jamaica, you're spoiled as a young person in civic engagement, because there are spaces created for young people to engage in the process. But when you come up here and you realize that many of those spaces don't exist, and if they do, they're not as official as one may have in Jamaica, where you have, you know, students sitting on school boards and everything like that. But there is still space. And depending on who you are and where you are in the political culture of where you are, because I'm in Florida, the political culture here is different from, say, the political culture in the state of Connecticut or in California or in Texas. And you have to navigate those spaces as a young person, particularly with a little bit of caution, because I'm in spaces where I'm traditionally not supposed to be as a young person, as an immigrant, and as a Black person. So it's very different up here compared to Jamaica. I would say Jamaica is a better place to be in if you want to engage, but if you want results and if you want to show how results oriented you are, I would strongly suggest having some sort of experience outside. But everything is not for everybody. You have to do what's best for yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. All right. So asking again, any questions?
Oh my goodness, nobody?
I am not seeing any questions currently in the chat. Yeah.
All right. Could I ask the tech team to drop the evaluation form in the chat, please, while we're wrapping up Christopher's presentation, because we want to ensure that everyone here all 24 of us would have an opportunity to evaluate the session. All right, so since that we don't have any questions, I'm going to take one final comment from Christopher. Is there any final advice you'd want to give the students here, most of which are just starting out in civic engagement? Any final advice?
I would say don't take yourselves too seriously. Don't take yourselves too seriously. And remember that everything that you do in this civic engagement space is in the service of people. And one thing that I always like to draw upon is our national pledge, because the words of it actually mean something, especially when it comes to being an active citizen. Because we put our hands on our chest and we say it and like it's nothing, but the words mean something. You know, before God and all mankind, I pledge the love and loyalty of my heart, the wisdom and courage of my mind, and the strength and vigor of my body in the service of my fellow citizens. It's right there in our pledge. We say it every day. We pledge and we promise to stand up for justice, stand up for what is right. We stand up for brotherhood and we stand up for peace. And we commit ourselves in that same pledge to work diligently and honestly, right? So that Jamaica may, under God, increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity. All of what you're doing in this space is for the greater good of your community, of your parish, of your region, of your school, of the country. You are doing it for the prosperity of everyone, not just yourself, right? And at the end, of course, and to play our part, Jamaica's part, in advancing the welfare of the whole human race, which means you are not just doing a service to your community or just to Jamaica, you are doing a service to humanity as a whole, because you could do something in Jamaica and someone, say from Namibia or South Africa, could see you doing this and be like, hey, this looks like it could work here. And they literally transplant your work over there and make it make sense over there, and they will impact lives. So all it is just don't take yourselves too seriously, and remember that you're doing this for the people, not yourself.
All right, powerful way to end, Christopher. Thank you so much
You're very
for being.
welcome.
I know you have to leave and resume your lobbying for the evening, because we know that you have to work even after the
Oh
formal session.
yes. Oh
where
yes.
power dynamics really happen. So thank you so much.
Yes.
We'll talk.
Okay.
All right, no problem.